What is going on, movie meals? Welcome to the Cantina. This is a brand new podcast. I'm starting here on Movie Meals. Kyle and I have been talking about expanding some of the shows we do here outside of just movie reviews and trailer reactions. And one of those things is a Star Wars podcast. You guys know how big of a Star Wars fan I am. And if you don't, please go check out our review of The Last Jedi trailer that dropped a couple months back. And you'll definitely see how big of a Star Wars fan I can be. But that's all this podcast is. Just us talking Star Wars here in the Cantina. What it means to me, the books I've been reading, movie news. And speaking of news, there's no better time to start this podcast and talk about news than with what's going on with the young Han Solo film. So first, for those of you that don't know, Lord and Miller, Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who were going to direct the young Han Solo film, were fired about 80% into shooting with only a little bit of time left of shooting this film. They've been shooting since, I think, about January, and they were fired about a week or so ago, and a lot of information has come out. The fact that Kathleen Kennedy, the main producer and head of Lucasfilm, and Lawrence Kasdan, the writer who really fleshed out Han Solo, he also wrote Empire Strikes Back, that they really were disagreed with a lot of the style that Lord and Miller brought to the table. And there's been a lot of struggles with fans, I've noticed, not only of Star Wars, but of cinema, on why you fire someone so late in the process when you knew what their style was going to be, if the style was really the problem. So that's what I'm here to talk about today. There's a lot of information that keeps coming out, stuff that Alden Ehrenreich, the actor who's playing Han Solo, has been stated bringing up, the fact that they've hired Ron Howard to take over. So first, let's just start with my thoughts on everything here. I'm actually all right with it. I really am. I'm okay with what's happened, and I'm a huge Ron Howard fan. Rush is a great movie. I know he's had a lot of misses recently outside of Rush, but going back to Splash even and Cinderella Man, he's made some movies, A Beautiful Mind, movies that I really love. So I'm more than happy with him coming on board. My thoughts on Lord and Miller leaving. I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of my friends about this, and I have an interesting view on why they were fired from the project. Let me get this out first. I love Lord and Miller to death. I think they're great directors. I really, really like what they have done, especially with the Lego movie. I thought the Lego movie was fantastic. I believe I saw it like 2 or 3 times in the theater. I absolutely love that movie. But they do have a specific style. And a lot of reports from like Star Wars News.net, as well as the Hollywood Reporter, Collider, they've all brought different news things they've heard to the table. A lot of it has come that Kathleen Kennedy and them didn't like that Lord and Miller only usually set up about 3 or 4 angles for every scene and shot they chose, and that they would follow the script for a few takes and then do a lot of takes of improvisation. And they're big on improvising, where we know that Lawrence Kasdan is not a big fan of improvising. And yes, I know some of the greatest moments in Star Wars are from improvising on Episode 5, where Han Solo says, I know, when Leia tells him that she loves him. But it's a little bit different. Kasdan, I think, is okay with improvising, but just not as much as Lord and Miller is. There's also reports that Alden Ehrenreich said to a producer that he was not liking the direction the character was being taken in. And that producer then went and talked to Kathleen Kennedy. And I've heard a lot of people say, why would he do that? Is he going behind the director's back? And I think, odds are he sat down with a producer at lunch. And a producer said, how are you feeling about the project? How have your thoughts been? And he just gave him the truth that maybe he's not feeling that the comedy is really working for him, and he wants to stick closer to the script and not do so many takes of being told to improvise. Where I think someone like Donald Glover, who's such a great actor, I mean, they're all great actors, but he has a lot of improvisation in his background, so it might not bother him as much. Especially also with the fact that Alden Ehrenreich really, really has to get this character right. Because if he doesn't, it's going to be tough for him to bounce back. This is Han Solo. There's a lot riding on a film that a lot of people didn't even really want. I'm not even sure I really want. I still want my Obi-Wan movie, which I hope we're getting. But I think when it comes down to it, he made the right decision if it's true that he said to a producer, I'm not liking the direction the character's going in. And another report that came out is that they hired a acting coach very late in the game to help him, but I'm all right with that too. That's not a big deal to bring in, so even if it is late in the game, because if he truly didn't like the direction it was going in, we don't know behind closed doors what happened. He could have suggested, why don't we bring in an acting coach for myself since we have a new director coming on board? We just don't know, and it's never a mistake for talent to up their game. It's never a mistake for a basketball player to suddenly have a new idea when working out that would improve his physical stamina, and I think that works well with actors too. I think there's never a bad time to bring in someone to help them move forward in developing and fleshing out a character, especially one as loved as Han Solo. So that's one thing. There's also many issues where fans are saying, how did they not see this beforehand? How have you sat in meetings and not known? And we know from Rogue One that they have had a lot of issues with Gareth Edwards as well. Not these same type of issues, but that Gareth Edwards would play ball a little bit. He brought them a movie they weren't necessarily wanting, maybe a little bit darker, more war grittier tone. Even though I still think we got glimpses of that, but he was willing to play the game with them, and he had, I would say, better chemistry with Kathleen Kennedy and everyone over at Lucasfilm. He was able to play this game with them and say, you know what, bring in someone else's vision, and let's see what they can add. And I think it worked out because I'm a big fan of Rogue One. I think Rogue One really, really worked. Where I think Phil Lord and Chris Miller just could not handle not getting the direction they wanted. They always wanted more creative freedom and felt they weren't getting it. So when they were told, hey, you got to change these things up, they said no. Kathleen Kennedy did what was in her right, and she let them go off the project. And I think that's okay. Especially if there was another part of the report that said, hey, their dailies look fine. But it was when they went into the editing bay and seeing some of the cuts that were already being formed together, and when scenes were put together where they felt, and that's where the quote of it feeling like Ace Ventura came out. And I don't think they felt it was so slapsticky like Jim Carrey and Ace Ventura. I think that it was just an overreaction because it was more than they felt they needed for this film. So they brought it up. They ended up firing the editor and replacing him, and firing the directors and replacing him with Ron Howard. And I think this is going to work out. Another thing I want to touch on is a lot of people have said this feels safe. And I don't necessarily think it is safe. I'm not sure safe is the right word. I do believe it is safe in a way that this is someone in the family. It's someone they trust. I mean, Ron Howard has worked with George Lucas on American Graffiti and projects before, directing a movie that George Lucas wrote. So he has connections to all these people. But when we go back and we look at J.J. Abrams, or even what we've heard at Celebration from Rian Johnson, I think J.J. and Rian Johnson played ball with Kathleen Kennedy. I don't think it was a matter of, this is my vision and you have to let me do my vision, where it sounds like that's what Lord and Miller wanted. It's more of a relationship, I think, that Kevin Feige has with the Russo brothers, where they're all sitting around a table saying ideas, and they all come to a conclusion that, hey, this is cool. We got something really cool here. And I think there was such a difference with Lord and Miller and Kathleen Kennedy that it wasn't working. Whereas when that happened with Gareth Edwards was willing to say, okay, let's try your style too. We've got what I have. Bring in someone else to do some reshoots. And they ended up putting together a product that I actually think Gareth Edwards is probably pretty proud of. I think he is proud of what they have brought in Rogue One. And I think Ron Howard is going to be able to play that game. I don't think Ron Howard's going to sit back, and I've seen a lot of people online think that Lawrence Kasdan's going to basically direct this film now. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think that Lawrence Kasdan is going to say, hey, do this the way that they weren't doing it. And Ron Howard's going to do that. But then when Ron Howard has something, because he's now the director, he's going to bring part of his vision to this. If he sees something that he really thinks should work, he will push back a little bit, and it's because of that mutual respect. He may not get what he wants, and sometimes Lawrence Kasdan may not get what he wants. But I think that's going to work out well. And we also don't know how this movie is going to turn out. Apparently, a lot of the footage Lord and Miller shot is usable. So we may never know we may find out when the movie comes out. We may not, that how much of those shots were actually Lord and Miller as compared to Ron Howard. But I don't think Ron Howard is really coming in just because it's like, oh, it's a big name, but it's a safe choice, and now we're not being, rebellious. And that's another thing I've seen too, is a lot of people are upset that Lord and Miller weren't allowed to use their style. And I think, and I'm not saying everyone's doing this, but from a lot of what I've seen online, I think we're so used to as film fans and fans of Hollywood, when we hear something like Josh Trank on Fantastic Four just getting bullied by the studio, or I hate to pick on Fox here, but even when they were with I can't think of the director's name right now, but who worked on the Wolverine film, who he had so many notes, and they came in and they changed a lot right at the last minute, and he wasn't allowed to use his creative freedom. I think this is a little bit different. I think Kathleen Kennedy let them do what they wanted, but when she finally came in and saw the cuts and saw some of the footage put together, she said, "This isn't what we want. Will you guys change it?" And when they said no, she in her right had the ability and fired them, and I think she was in the right to do so. Because if you're going to fire someone, you should, if it's not working with your vision. And I think as film fans, sometimes we get caught up on let the artist be the artist. And I agree with that. The artist should be them. But this is an industry where you have to play ball with big studio heads. You have to. You're not going to always get the exact creative freedom you want every single time you make a movie. And on something so big as Star Wars, you have to work with the studio. And I think because so many fans are so upset with, let Lord and Miller do their direction. Why'd you take the artistry away from them? I think this time Kathleen Kennedy and the studio is in the right. And I think they made the right call. And maybe I'm wrong. I might not be. And I may be. We'll never know until we see the movie and if we find out more information. But right now, she saw that these directors weren't going with something that is really Han Solo. And if Lawrence Kasdan, too, someone who created this character, and he's announced his final project with Lucasfilm, I think it's up to him to say, too, this is not working. But they did give it a shot. It was a relationship where they could feel early on this might not work, but they cared enough to give it a shot. And I think that's important then to realize later, if Kathleen Kennedy left them on, we may have gotten a bad movie. Maybe we would have gotten a great movie. But I trust Kathleen Kennedy to say, this movie probably is not going to work, and we need to let these guys go if they're not willing to change the direction we need it to go in, it to keep the script and the story we have. There's even reports that the whole cast and crew, especially a lot of the crew, didn't also like the way Lord and Miller were running things, that they gave a standing ovation when they heard Ron Howard was going to be the new director. And I think that's a really interesting point, because if they really were so lax on such a big production, and they've worked on big movies before, but this is Star Wars, guys. This is a completely different ball game. And if the whole crew, people doing costumes and doing alien designs or ship designs, if they were being told, just do whatever, which may have not been what was happening, but it sounded like they were having such a lax time that they were upset by that. They needed more direction too, and Lord and Miller weren't giving them that, where Ron Howard might be able to give them what they need. And on such a big production, I'm starting to really believe that Kathleen Kennedy made the right call. Lord and Miller are not going to have trouble finding a new movie. They'll probably go back to Flash over at Warner Brothers in DC. I don't think this is going to be such a big explosion of hate once the film actually comes out. I think when the film comes out, I think it's going to end up being pretty good, if not great or just okay. If it can be any of those, we will forgive them. If it's awful, it's going to be tough. People are going to be blamed. A lot of that blame is going to go on Kathleen Kennedy, but we will never know. If 70% of the film is Lord and Miller's work, and Ron Howard just kind of finished it and they changed a few things, but a lot of it was what Lord and Miller ended up shooting, then we will know if the movie's bad that it wasn't Lord and Miller's direction that worked. And if Ron Howard shoots a lot over it and reshoots and changes a lot, and it ends up being bad, then we will know maybe Ron Howard didn't do such a great job. But if the movie is good, that's all that matters, is that we have a good movie. This is a scary movie to bring out, even more terrifying than Rogue One, because Harrison Ford is not playing a character we have known for so long, through 4 films. And if Alden Ehrenreich doesn't do good as fans, it's going to upset a lot of us. So a lot is riding on this film. I think it's becoming really, really important to watch more developments as the weeks go on, because so much news has come out and we really never know what's going to happen. It really is a breakup. It's whose side are we going to take, Lord Miller or Kathleen Kennedy? And we'll never know the full truth, so I don't necessarily know if either of them are to blame. Right now I am leaning to the side that Kathleen Kennedy made the right decision by letting him go, that they made a good call. And I'm excited to see what Lord and Miller end up doing next. I'm excited for Ron Howard's version of this. And I think this film is actually going to end up being pretty good. And I really hope it's good, because I am really nervous for it. Hey guys, thanks again so much for sticking with us on the Welcome to the Cantina podcast. It's been really fun talking about Star Wars with you today, and I hope to continue to make these podcasts moving forward here on Movie Meals. Please comment below your thoughts, give it a big thumbs up, like and share this all around, and check out all the great content we have here at Movie Meals. And as always, I have to thank my mom for listening today. Thanks guys, we'll see you later.